You only get one run down the river, this river of no return. You can't always go back upstream and rerun the rapids with faster, sleeker equipment on a better, cleaner line. You also can't always see what's around the next bend. You can, however, decide in the next second to choose your course, to pick the best line through the next rapids, to change directions. And you don't have to be perfect at it either. Be the best paddler you can be and tumble, rumble, and ramble as you face obstacles, rocks, eddies, boils, growing within your true self and embracing gratitude with this each turn.
Well, hey everyone. Welcome to episode 377 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen with your host, Matt Payne. This week, I'm happy to bring you a conversation with Colleen Miniuk to discuss the impetus behind her new book, So Says the River. Her book is a tour de force, well worth your attention. I had an opportunity to read it and I couldn't put it down. Longtime listeners of the podcast may recall that we had Colleen originally all the way back on episode 56 in 2018. So it's been a while since we've been able to connect with Colleen. This episode surely will inspire you, so stay tuned all the way through. Before we get started, I wanted to thank some new supporters of the podcast. These kind and generous individuals have stepped up to support the show over on Patreon as well as on PayPal, which are the only ways that this podcast survives. I recently had some people ask me if this podcast was sponsored, and I replied, no, it was not. And they were shocked to hear that. Indeed, this podcast depends on you. Your financial support is vital to keep the show going. So if you would like to join these awesome individuals, please just hit pause and help me right now by visiting patreon.com/fstop and listen. Without further ado, thanks to Catherine Smith, George Taylor, Matt Redfern, Ron Ouellette, Patrick Crone, James Voot, and Paul Whitworth. Y'all rock. Okay, let's get to this week's conversation with Colleen Miniuk. Colleen Miniuk, it's great to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. I'm glad to be here. Good to see you.
You as well. And everyone likes to call you Bubbles.
Yep, there's reasons.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, bubbles are a cool photography subject.
Oh, it's amazing. No one can be sad when you're photographing bubbles. Right? Bubbles make life
we're
better.
Playing with bubbles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blowing bubbles, playing with bubbles, losing your mind over bubbles. What more do you need in life?
Yeah. Well, I got to say, I really have enjoyed being present to see you do some keynote speeches for out of Chicago. That's been really cool. And I know one of the ones you gave was really related to what we're going to talk about today, but I just wanted to say how much I appreciate kind of the way that your brain works and how you've woven it into your approach to photography.
Well, thanks, Matt. I really appreciate that. I'm just really grateful to you and all of the many wonderful things and ways you inspire the photography community. So I'm really honored to be talking with you today. So
yeah, and we get to continue that tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to dive deep into going into your new book, which is called So Said the River. And I wanted to first thank you for sending me an advance copy. It was really delightful. And I honestly, I mean this truly, I couldn't put it down, and I don't read a lot. And usually when I read, I'm like, oh, I'm falling asleep. This is boring. But your book just kept me engaged. So way to go.
Thank you so much for that feedback. That's great to hear. And yeah, I'm just really honored that you took the time out of your very busy schedule to read an advance review copy. It meant a lot to me. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into this thing, huh?
Why not?
All right. So one of the overarching concepts that I was able to glean from your book is this idea of the arrival fallacy. And I was hoping we could talk a little bit about that. What is it and how has it shaped your adult life?
Sure, absolutely. So the arrival fallacy was first defined by a psychologist from Harvard University. His name was Tal Ben Shahar. Hopefully, I've got that pronunciation correct. And it's this misconception that we carry that once we achieve a goal, we will be happy, except that we never actually arrive because there's always another goal to achieve. And so the idea of setting lofty goals isn't really the problem. And what I found in my journey is that goals really put a rudder on life. We just don't want to be sitting on the couch, right? Like we want to have some motivation to have some purpose and some motivation to achieve goals. The trouble is with an overachieving perfectionist like I am, is that even when we achieve the goals, we never actually ever get satiated enough to be enough, to feel joy, to feel, any sort of fulfillment with this. It's a very, very short term, like kind of a hit of dopamine. And then it's like right back onto the hedonic treadmill. And even though you're on that track, like you never actually get there. And for me, that was me for the first 40 years of my life. And I started to understand that I was falling prey to the arrival fallacy when I started writing chapters 3 and chapter 4 in the book. And so in chapter 3, like I list this laundry list, an assortment of achievements that, over the course of my life. And it was things like being first chair in the band. It was being the co-captain of the cheerleading squad. It was getting a 5.1 out of 5.0, like being named All-American for volleyball. It was getting a scholarship to Stanford and University of Michigan. And it was like, oh my God, I'm just exhausted thinking about all of that. And in the moment, like, it's exhausting, right? I I took all of that for granted, like while it was happening. I mean, yeah, sure, I got the quick hit of dopamine and it was awesome, but it was like there's always something more. And really, part of the arrival fallacy is such that when you achieve the goal, that was just your expectation. And so there's really nothing to celebrate. Like, why would you celebrate like something you expected to do? And so, as like it was amazing, but I was just like, oh, well, I've just got to do more, always more. And so I talk about it in chapter 4 a little bit more about my transition from being a software engineer at Intel and moving into a freelance photography and writing career, which was more of an escape hatch. Now it's, I've been out of the queue for about 17 years now, and now it's life. But at the time, it was really just an escape. I didn't associate it with the arrival fallacy. I wasn't associating it with internal things that were going on with me. I was associating it with all the external things. And, at one point I kind of recognized that I had it all and I still wasn't happy. And I actually, in the book, I'm like, what in the hell is wrong with me? Like, it's so ironically, what triggered me to start challenging my inadvertent subscription to the arrival fallacy wasn't more success. It wasn't achieving more goals. Ironically, it was my failures. So to help me cope with the devastation of separating from my husband and find some semblance of self-worth, I decided to stand up paddleboard across Lake Powell, a reservoir along the Colorado River on the Arizona-Utah border, and that trip did not go according to plan. I'd failed twice in an 8-month period, and I, failed in air quotes. I started asking, like, when was this all enough? Like, and who was I working so hard for, and why? Like, what was the point of all of this? Like, how many more boxes did I need to check before this elusive, happiness would magically appear? And so I call chapter 13 re-entry, and it was it was kind of a brutal re-entry. And so I started to see that there's a lot of societal messages bombarding us about where happiness comes from. And it's things like, if we just had more money, we just had more job promotions, we had more beautiful looks, we had more popularity, like we'll finally find happiness. And it's like, keep checking those boxes. And in my journey, I found that was not the case at all. And I had checked all the boxes, some of them twice. And I still enjoy setting lofty goals, but I do so more with an autotelic personality. I do so with the intent of learning and discovering, like regardless of what happens, with the results. And now I try to appreciate. I don't take, any moment that I have with photography or my career or any accomplishments for granted. I no longer delay gratification. I eat my pie first, which is a critical metaphor in the book.
Yes, it is.
And, I would have never have guessed it, but my life is way more fulfilling when I jumped off the hedonic treadmill and I stopped subscribing to this arrival fallacy that there is so much in this life to enjoy and to appreciate and to discover. And I refer to this kind of like this big package of this new attitude change is kind of the big life with a capital L in the book, keeping your paddle all into the flow of life or treating every day like it's your birthday. So there's a couple of different messages in the book that kind of all support this idea of, yeah, you can be amazing, you can have accomplishments, but also like be in the moment and appreciate what's really happening, what's unraveling in your life.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. It was interesting as I was reading along in your book. It was really resonating with an experience that I had last summer when I did the Colorado Trail, because you covered a lot of the same territory that I was kind of slowly uncovering through my 35-day hike in terms of like reimagining what is the origin of happiness and realizing that it's not material goods, it's not achievements necessarily, it's our relationships with other human beings, it's the joy, the simple, easy joys that we get from being in nature.
Right.
It's things that we take for granted every day. And that was something that I really loved about reading your book, is that you kind of came to all of these realizations, even though, you're in your 40s. It's not too late to figure out some of these things, right?
That's right. Like better late than never, right? And some people don't ever find that, and that's unfortunate. But I mean, I think when you're out in nature, I'm out in nature, anyone's out in nature, we kind of get stripped of what I call the manufactured world. I call nature the real world. And so it's kind of flipped. When we're out in the real world, we start to make connections with not just nature, but our own nature. Like, who are we? And we don't have the external voices constantly bombarding us, so we can be whoever we want out there. And the challenge is coming back to the manufactured world, that reentry, and trying to maintain like that semblance of authenticity, right? I mean, I'm sure you went through some sort of reentry being on the trail for 35 days. That's incredible. Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was really hard. I didn't want to come back.
I actually ask every time we go down the Colorado River on the Grand Canyon, I'm like, just leave me here on the beach. I'll be fine. Like, just leave me here.
Seriously?
Yeah. Just leave me the coffee and the Oreos. I'm happy. I'll be happy. I'll be fine.
Exactly. So in your book, you do a really wonderful job of kind of describing this amazing journey that you embarked on with your mom, which I thought was a really nice piece of it.
She's incredible.
Yeah, I was like, wow, she's badass.
She totally is. Yeah.
But I was also amazed the fact that you guys were, you're going to paddleboard across Lake Powell, which I feel like I've never met anyone else who's tried to do that before. And so anyway, you talk about perfectionism, control, and expectations in the book, and how that drove you for so much of your life. I'm curious how your adventure journey reshaped your belief systems relating to those concepts.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. My mom and I had done some trial runs, locally around Phoenix, Arizona, to just kind of get in the paddle of things, if you will. And we had done a test run on Lake Powell, but when we launched from the shore and were, set off on our very first day, like nature just started peeling away the layers right away. I mean, we didn't even go, I don't know, before we started talking about these things, talking about fear and perfectionism and expectations. And it was just awesome. So nature was just stripping us to our core right away. And so What I think I learned about perfectionism, control, and expectations is that at least at a high level, all three of them are not real, and they're really not attainable. And so, when my husband and I decided to first separate, that I could no longer live a perfect life. Like I just that was not something I would ever be able to achieve. And I thought that a perfect life was staying married for the rest of my life till death do us part. And so I couldn't meet societal or even personal expectations. And so it was then like, okay, now what? And so I instantly turned to control and swimming upstream to try to meet societal expectations. Like, I'm going to fix this. I'm not going to be a divorcee. I'm going to be perfect at life and it's going to be amazing. And I believed for the first 40 years of my life that if I, planned better, studied longer, trained more, that I could control outcomes. And for many years, when I saw success, I got the illusion that I was controlling things. And, don't get me wrong, like you absolutely want to be prepared for life, whatever. But I thought that I could strong arm my way to success by planning and studying and training better and perfectly. And by achieving all of that success, I thought I can control other people's opinions of me. I thought they would like me. I thought that I would please them. And if I pleased them enough, people like my husband and just society in general, that I would eventually be happy. And of course, that's not how it works. And that's not obviously how it worked for me. So, no amount of planning or studying or training or anything was going to control, another person's decisions. No amount of planning or studying or training or anything could have controlled, our experience with Mother Nature and the winds and the waves. And it turns out that, even though I was a, expert planner, the universe does not give a crap about all of the plans that you have made up, and written down on a spreadsheet while you were sitting on your couch eating Cheetos. And so I learned over time, right? Like the universe does not care. Like, it's like, great, awesome. Here's what's really going to happen. And so I learned over time that control was an illusion, and it was an attempt to exert, control over the unknown and the unknowable. For me, it was a lack of self-confidence and self-worth in general. Like, I didn't believe that I could face the worst. I, could only achieve. And so that's that's a big part why I feared swimming in water where I couldn't see my feet. I couldn't control what I couldn't see. And so the only thing really that's certain, none of it is certain. None of it. Like, even no matter how you plan or how much you plan, like, none of it is certain. You can't control anything. And really the only thing that is certain in life is the one thing that we don't plan for usually, and that's death. The rest of it is a complete free-for-all. And it's, even with all the personal and the societal expectations thrown in, like, we're all making it up. And so I realized while staring at the million-year-old rocks and cliffs that nothing in this life actually matters. And that's something that I started to feel on the Lake Powell trip, but got a little bit sidetracked by watching my mom almost die. So if it's okay, I would love to read 3 paragraphs from chapter 18, which talks about that trip. Would that be cool?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I'm down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I'm on day 1. It's my first time on the Colorado River down in the Grand Canyon, and I'm having this, like, it was the most epic, most beautiful thing I had ever experienced, even in the first day. And so I'm sitting on the shoreline, I'm on the beach, and so here's the 3 paragraphs. There are no universal definitions as to how we should or shouldn't live our life, or how the people around us should or shouldn't live theirs. Society tries to make us believe it has all the answers. It doesn't. Everyone is making this up as we go. In the excessive guesses that swirl around us day in and day out, what mattered was creating whatever meaning you wish out of your own life in however much time you are granted. We own our own answers. Spending time with the Colorado River had taught me how to embrace feeling inconsequential to the manufactured world. In becoming irrelevant to others, I became relevant to myself. In becoming relevant to myself, I discovered how irrelevant most things in the manufactured world were and are. I learned what was relevant to me. When you stop focusing on your importance to others, the importance of living your life in your own way becomes clear. To understand your own significance and the insignificance of the grand scheme of things is to understand your own freedom. I now comprehended that this astounding chance and remarkable privilege to exist was all I had and all I will ever have. And I was all I had or have through it. People, money, material things, and accomplishments would all come and go. But I was the only person coming along for the entirety of my own journey. So what I say goes for me.
There you go. I think that perfectly encapsulates it. One of the things that I struggle with, I've come to some of those same conclusions on my own, but because of the bombardment we get from, media, social media, like the way we're wired as human beings, whatever, culture, I have to constantly remind myself of these things. Like it's like you have to constantly practice it. And I was curious if you found the same to be true for yourself.
Absolutely. So, in this whole journey, I started being very self aware of the voices in my own head and where those voices were coming from, why I was having them. It was just very, yeah. And I became very particular about what was going into the brain as well. So, in software engineer, we have a term called garbage in, garbage out, or GIGO. And like, if you make the most perfect application or you build the most perfect application and you put bad data through it, like bad data is going to come out. And so I think the same thing goes for voices and messages and expectations. It's what you feed your brain, you become. And so I'm very particular now about what goes into my brain because ultimately it's going to come out somehow, usually in photography or some other artistic pursuit. But it's just being really mindful, being very self-aware of your surroundings and your own internal being.
Yeah, and I mean, you can take that so many directions, like the type of TV you watch, the type of newspaper you read, the types of books you read, the people that you spend time with. I mean, all of those things can influence all of that garbage in. So it's tough.
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't watched TV and I have a TV, but I don't have like cable, so I don't like watch TV. So, I try to be an informed citizen, but ultimately, especially when we, consider the artistic journey and the photography journey, I spend most of my time trying to find things that inspire me or move me or challenge me to think in a little bit different direction. And so, I try to be very mindful of what goes in. Yep.
Yeah. So what I really loved about what you just talked about and the key themes of your book is that it invites readers to question their own belief systems and ways of defining success or thinking through things like perfectionism or whatever. And, obviously this can apply to how we treat other people or like things at work or whatever, but
Everything.
yeah, everything. But specifically for our audience, I can see it relating to photography. And so I'm curious, from where you sit, how do you see these concepts relating to how we approach our photography?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the goal is to be authentic in your voice, in your delivery, in your visual messages, not being a copy of someone else out there or other people. And so I like to bastardize Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, and the original quote is, "What other people think of you is none of your business." And I often modify this to photography, which is, "What other people think of your photography is none of your business." And it's, I think it's about being self-aware and being mindful and asking ourselves questions, in the same way that we'd ask ourselves about life purpose, like things like, why am I here? What does my life mean? What do I value? What's important to me? What do I want to do with this time, this gift of time? I think we can ask similar questions for photography. And that's, it's as simple as, why are you a photographer? Like, why do you even pick up a camera? Like, what's your reward? A photographer making photographs, creating? What about all of that brings you joy? And it's not clicking the shutter. Like, it's not, right? So what are your values? What do you want to do with your photography? I mean, maybe that's sharing, maybe it's not. Maybe you just do it because you love it. Like, and that's enough. Like, we don't have to have all of these grand, plans or grand goals of sharing or selling our work or whatever. Is just enough to bring meaning into our life. And I think the other part that I would add to that is really understanding, you talked about success and defining success. It's, what's your definition of a good photograph. I wrote a Dear Bubbles column a bit ago about if no one saw your photos. And the question is if no one saw your photographs, how would you photograph differently? And if so, how? The answer is that's what you should be doing right now. Because again, what other people think of your photography is none of your business. And so go do that, whatever that is, and go forth and create, right? And so stop worrying about what other people think about your photography or your journey, your successes, your failures, whatever it is in life. And when it comes to photography, I mean, look, you're the one who has to live with not anybody else. And so we should be making images that we're proud of, that represent our own individual experience and connection with the world that we experience and only we can experience. And so, make photographs that mean something to you, if to no one else, to you, because that alone is worth it. And I think the same thing goes for life. And, make your life mean something, if to no one else but you, because that alone is worth your time.
Yeah, I love all that. It's funny because last night I was editing some of my photos from Death Valley because before I go on this trip tomorrow, I want to release all these images out into the world. And so it's a lofty goal. I don't know why I set these ridiculous goals for myself, but it keeps me motivated.
You should think about that.
I know, it's a whole, like we could, I could get a couch and we could talk through it, but I had an image that I edited and it had some flaws, like the light wasn't ideal, like the composition had some issues that I was like, I just wish there was something right over there that would have helped this particular aspect of the image. But at the end of the day, I decided to keep it in because I loved the interplay of some of the subjects and things like that. So like I'm constantly trying to like find this balance of releasing my, like, what's the perfect photo, but then like just letting go of some of that and releasing some of those images into the world, because you never know, like other people might not care if it has those flaws. And
I mean, that's
right.
They're too busy with their own life, right? I mean, they may click the like button on Facebook, but like, I mean,
I know. It's like, what does it matter?
Well, so here's your homework, is to define what ideal is. Like, what is that? What is an ideal photograph? What is ideal light, and to who? Like, to you or to the world? Like who's making this stuff up? Like, and everybody is. So like, you might as well make up something that works best for you. And so, challenge your beliefs, I think is really important in that journey of growth.
Yeah. And I like what you said about just focusing on what moves you. Like, obviously I captured that image in the moment because I liked what was happening in the scene. And that right there should be good enough,
It is. Yeah. I mean,
so there you go.
Why are you a photographer? It's not to get a like on Facebook, right? I mean,
no, it's obviously for fame and fortune.
Right. Yes.
I picked the wrong profession for that.
Done that. Like, it's overrated anyway. I mean, it's like, just being out in nature, right? I mean, just being outside and connecting and hearing, sandhill cranes, or smelling petrichor, or, looking at flowers. Like, that's what enriches life, at least for me. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind, is that we can all have different definitions of success. Like, my definition of what a good photograph is does not have to be yours. It does not have to be the listener's. It's my work, right? And it's your work. And so it's finding what fits best for you. And I think the same thing goes for life. Like, I would love for us to be less judgmental and just let people be who they are, because we gain strength, we gain understanding, we gain so much by just letting people be whoever they are, like whatever that looks like. And so,
well, and the other piece of that I've found interesting is, like, in the back of my head, I have this, like, I've asked myself all those questions before, like, what would an ideal life look like? But the challenge you get to when you get to our age is that you have other human beings that are a part of your life, right? And they might not have that same vision that you hold. Like, they might still be on that hedonic treadmill of like, I want a house with 2 cars and a 2-car garage, and like, I want to go out to dinner three nights a week. Like, they have all of these other things that they're defining, which is fine, right? Like, if that's what brings you happiness, that's great. But then when you get into these situations where you're married and you have different ideas, that's where it gets really complicated.
Absolutely. And I mean, admittedly don't have those challenges. Like I'm on my own. I don't have dependents. I have a wonderful family, but it's, my life looks pretty different than the average, the average male or female in the United States. And so it is much easier to do this, in my own little bubble, if you will. It is much harder when you have other responsibilities, other dependents, other people that are counting on you to help them through their own life journey and guide them. And so I don't have that experience, obviously, so I can't really I can't comment on that other than I know that it is very difficult, and yeah, it is a worthy endeavor on its own.
So I know you already touched on this a little bit, but I think it might open up a couple other doors for us. So
Sure.
I'm curious, you've kind of gone on several little mini adventures along the way that you've talked about through the book, but I'm curious how this overall journey has reshaped or reframed the things that you actually place value in.
Yeah, I mean, the Colorado River completely reshaped me, and my attitudes, and for that I'm forever grateful. And it's an ironic thing, especially because given my fear of water, like to be listening to a river. So the river really helped me to redefine success and what fulfillment looked like for me. It taught me what's good enough in my own life at a time where I never ever felt good enough. No matter, yeah, even with all the accomplishments, I never felt good enough. And I think the river specifically is showed me that flowing on this river of life, navigating the many rapids that we are going to experience over the course of our lifetime, some expected, some unexpected, and shaping your surroundings, for me, is enough. Like, it's not just enough for me to sit on my couch and, let life flow by. I want to make a difference. I want to contribute to the world. I want my life to mean something. And so what that I think meant for me was that I kind of at a more detailed level to continue listening to all the voices that I had been listening to, both from myself and society. I mean, it was a two-part game here. Things like I must achieve or I must be popular. I had a lot of frank conversations with myself about what I actually valued. And anytime I had a thought come by, I challenged my thought one by one. When you have an analytical introvert that finds themselves unexpectedly alone, you kind of have time for these kinds of contemplations, and in the stillness and in the silence. And I refer to this as the flat water in chapter 17, where you just have this kind of empty space where you're not really sure what to do with it. I started listening to my own voice, and I really discovered that after having things like imposter syndrome and presenting a facade to the outside world for so long, I really value authenticity and honesty because I know how hard it is to get there. And I value things like learning and discovery, curiosity, creativity, instead of judging and achieving, which really helps me kind of set aside this the arrival fallacy, notions. And I value divergent thinking, after so many years of I must have the right answer. Like now it's like, oh, well, expand your thinking and you can have multiple definitions of success simultaneously. Like, how fun is that? Like, and so I think the other major thing that really happened, have a lot more fun. I like to have a good time now over being so serious. I was very serious growing up. And, I mean, be the responsible human being. I mean, take care of your businesses, take care of your responsibilities. But who said adulthood had to be a slog through mud while we're all dragging, our lifelong baggage around all the time, right? so yeah, I like to have fun. I like to be bubbles, is what I like. And so I think the other really major thing, and I think this is really important, especially as we try to engage with the world. You can escape to nature and you can be all by yourself, but we have community, and we have friends, and we have family, and we have people that we care about and we want to interact. I think for me, one of the biggest eye-opening things was that everybody was struggling. Everybody is struggling with something, and I'd like to believe that I've become more sensitive and more empathetic to that. I literally, and I know this is sort of embarrassing to admit, but I literally thought everybody else had a perfect life, and so like I literally was just trying to keep up. And it turns out that, being a human is pretty damn hard sometimes. And I have arguably had it extraordinarily easy thanks to support and privilege and opportunity. But, I don't care about impressing other people with my accomplishments. Like I don't care. Like I might accomplish something, but I might not tell anybody. And that's a lot of what like Lake Powell was. Like nobody knew or Lake Mead, sorry, nobody knew that I was crossing Lake Mead and nobody cared and I didn't really tell anybody. So like whatever, I just did it for me. Now I want, when I look at my work specifically, well, in life in general, I want to do whatever I can to help other people get through this crazy life just a little bit more smoothly, a little bit easier, and more deliberately. More deliberately is the key. And that really starts with giving people the space and time to feel confident in their own skin, to find whatever, whoever they are, and really allowing them to live in the light of whatever for them. They've got to figure it out. People have got to figure this out, but I am absolutely going to be your biggest cheerleader. I fully support it, whatever it is.
Awesome. Awesome. So in your book, there are so many poignant themes, including loss, self-discovery, finding fulfillment through adversity, the healing power of nature. How the hell did you find a way to cohesively organize all of these ideas? Because you did it.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. This was my biggest challenge. Like, I had a lot of issues to sort through. I mean, you should have a conversation with my amazing editor, Eric Bird. I swear to God, yeah, I asked him how many times he's read this manuscript. I mean, I think he's read it at least 6 or 7 times over 9 years, just in the development edit process alone. So I really can. I give major kudos to Eric. He really served as my shoreline. He kind of kept my words and ideas kind of flowing through a more narrow channel. And I think the other thing that really helped me was just talking through some of the concepts. I mean, part of writing the book, I was learning as I was going about like, wait, do I really believe this? Like, is this really what I want to say? Because I'm not sure I believe that. And so I would kind of, contemplate over time. So it was a process. But one of the most helpful things for me was talking through some of the concepts with my mom, my dad, my brother, my close friends like Guy Tall, who's in the book, and Jen, who I mentioned, Jen Raffaelli, who I mentioned, I think briefly in the book as well. It was funny. A number of years ago. So let me back up. Jen was my college roommate at Stanford, and we've been friends for over 30 years. And she took me camping for the first time in 1997, and I mentioned that in the book. But we're still friends. We still enjoy lots of adventures together. But we were having this conversation over dinner at her house, and with her and her husband, Michael, who's amazing as well. And Michael asked me what the theme of my book was. And I was like, what's a theme? And I mean, really up to that point, like my writing was really just kind of a puke of journal entries and like organized into chapters. The bones were there, but the narrative was kind of all over the place. And so I researched what a theme was. And I found another really helpful bit of advice, and that was that when you write a memoir presents an argument, and you are the example. And so the combination of theme and argument, those two things, and combined with my editor keeping me in line, I was able to present an argument. And the argument that I rewrote the whole book basically. So, but I rewrote it to fit around the theme. Can a person find fulfillment on their own, especially during adversity? And in fact, I even say this in chapter 4, can I really live a richer, happier life on my own without controlling my circumstances and seeking validation from others? And so now my book tries to prove through my actions that you can. I did. And so the manuscript has been heavily edited over and over and over, to make sure that everything, the scenes, the actions, the dialogue, the gesture, everything supports that idea. And I joke that maybe my manuscript is really a Theseus paradox, which Plutarch first described. It's, if you replace every word from the first draft, is it really the same book? And so, like, in my case, it's not. Where I ended on this journey was not at all how I planned it when I started, which is apropos for the book. I thought I was going to write a nice little story about my mom and me, two outdoorsy women, going on a nice little paddle together on Lake Powell. And just simply, the events, the way things unfolded, obviously it changed my life, but simply just writing the book also, just over and over and over again and challenging, is this really what I want to say? Really changed my life for the better as well. So it was no easy task. So I'm delighted to hear that.
How hard was it for you to release the perfectionism when it came to saying the book is ready to go?
Yeah, the funny thing is part of what I love about book publishing and the whole book process is that it's a very great application for my perfectionism. Like, you need to be looking out for commas and periods and all the things. Like, so it's really good application of it. But when I was starting to feel later in 2023 that I just felt it in it needed freedom. I needed to move on from the story. I had been sitting with it every day for well, now it's 9 years. I'd been sitting with it, and it was just like, every single day there was something that I did in support of the book. And so, I mean, it got me through my hardest, darkest times, but at the same time, there comes a moment where you're like, I want to help other people. I want them to hear these messages because I do think that it can help people through, their dark times. And when I decided that I was going to do it, I actually sobbed. Like, I just cried. Like, it was just like, no, not my baby going to college. Like, and then it was like, no, get out. Really weird. There's a really weird thing that goes on with like separation anxiety when you write a book. And I've experienced it with all of my previous guidebooks. Just this one is really different. Like, this is a very personal story. It's not technical, go to this location and make a great photograph. It's, here's my entire life on a platter. Hope you like it. It's like,
yeah, it's a lot different than a guidebook for sure.
Yeah. But it's been extraordinarily rewarding. So it's been a process. So
beautiful. So one powerful figure in your book who makes an appearance several times is Guy Tal. Guy's been on this podcast a few times, and yep. I've personally grown quite fond of him. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship and how your friendship has augmented your trajectory, not only as a photographer, but as a human being?
Yeah, absolutely. Guy is one of my closest friends, and to outsiders, it may look like a pretty odd friendship. In the book, I describe him as, being sensible, fervent, profound, even morose at times, and I am kind of like the other side of the coin. I'm sarcastic and flippant and blubbly. It's totally yin and yang. But
right. I was gonna say, like, I've never seen you guys together, but I couldn't think of two people who would be more opposite.
Well, I mean, there are things that are definitely opposite. However, we also have a great deal in common, and I think that's probably less obvious. And, obviously, we're both pretty introverted. He is way more introverted than I am, and I know a lot of people are surprised when I say that I am introverted. I'm comfortable around people that I already know and things like that, but I'm definitely introverted. He's just on the extreme side. We both left IT jobs to be freelance photographers, and we now write. We both love, analyzing ideas, and we banter, about philosophy and world and life and photography. And so it's a very engaging exchange most of the time. And in fact, just to give you an example, on our last camping trip together, we were reading bits and pieces of our forthcoming books to each other as we were talking about existentialism, and his forthcoming book be extraordinary. I got to hear bits and pieces of it, and it's amazing, as you can imagine. But it's a little bit intense. It's well reasoned. It's it's philosophical on, take on a bit of existentialism. And in So Said the River, I'm kind of talking about the same thing, but like in my own style, which is to be like, hey, y'all, come and jump on the stand-up paddleboard, and we're gonna go down a ride down the river to find our own meaning in this crazy wild life. And so, like, Guy and I very much aligned philosophically. It's just we say things in very different ways in our own authentic way, which is fantastic. That's like just what we want. We both preach and hope other people are encouraged to find their authentic voice as well. But when I first met Guy, I had met him online in 2011. I met him in Death Valley in person in 2000. Like everybody else, I was incredibly inspired by his photography and his writings, and obviously still am today. Kind of my own creative transformation in starting in 2013. He was incredibly supportive of that transformation. And that's really when I was starting to get bored with being a photographer that liked to take pictures, especially like copying other people's compositions, like just going to the iconic stuff. And I was trying to transition into my own ideas, into just really being a human who wanted to express myself in a variety of different ways. That was photography, writing, but I also do it now in painting and dancing and like whatever form. And the one thing about Guy that I appreciate so much is that he has always given me the space to be my weird, silly, dorky, ridiculous self. And it was even before I knew I needed that space, or even before I knew how to embrace being myself. And so that part of the journey comes into play kind of with the book. In 2015, the universe just happened to put us both at the Moab Photo Symposium, and we were both struggling with loss, albeit in different ways. And our conversations there and later over the next several years, well, even now today, even, they became kind of a think tank. Like we were just trying to figure out how to work through the pain, how to work through the confusion, the frustration, the anger, the sadness, all of the emotions and the uncertainty. And it kind of went back to the yin and yang. Like he would like toss out some philosophical wisdom to help me, get through whatever awfulness I was getting through. And then I would regurgitate it back to him when he would need it. And then I would be the cheerleader and the pep talk when he was feeling down. And then I'd get that back from him. And so it's, like I said, it's very yin and yang. We've had lots of laughs and cries and tequila toast and just about everything in between. But I'm really grateful for the opportunity to just simply know Guy as I do. But in the context of this book, I'm never going to forget that he helped me turn the darkest part of my life into what is now the brightest. He was there for the moment when my mom and I launched onto the Colorado River, when I kind of metaphorically left my old life behind on the shore and was, going into my new life in the Colorado River. He wrote a remarkable meta published in chapter 8. And he was the one who said I wasn't done when I very much felt like I was done. And we need those kind of people in our lives. And so he's obviously been a big part of the book process as well. So he wrote very moving forward. He's contributed photographs. The cover photo is from our 2016 Green River paddle together. And so Guy and all of the characters who are in the book who helped me along in this journey are a reminder that even when we find ourselves alone, we're never truly alone. And so as I wrote in my epilogue, people won't remember what you accomplished. They also won't remember your shortcomings or failures either. They'll remember how you impacted their lives. And it's very safe to say that Guy was a strong voice in helping me find my own voice. And he has no doubt impacted my life in very profoundly meaningful ways. So you'll get to hear more about you'll see the interactions a little bit in the books.
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually cool to see a different side of him through your writing.
Yeah, I think the Guy that I see is a bit different than the one that everybody else does. But
like tequila, and it's like, oh, okay, I can I'm down with this.
I can't give his facade away, right? I can't give his reputation away, but he's actually really funny. Like he's really hilarious. So
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
tell him I
Well,
said that. Oh my God, don't tell him I said that. Like no, I mean he's brilliant. He's brilliant, but he's also he can be really funny. You
I was
bet.
really curious. I was really curious to hear your take on this one. So, how can we balance the importance of authenticity with the ins and outs of marketing?
Oh yeah. Well, that comes down to finding ways of selling your work without selling your soul, and that is much easier said than done. When I left my corporate job and to pursue freelance photography in 2007, I had a mentor. I had asked a mentor, how do I make it as a photographer? And they, unfortunately, as I'm like literally walking out the door to Intel, was like, "You're never going to make it." And I was like, "Oh God." Like, oh no. And so I'd had enough work in landscape photography through art shows, editorial, and commercial shoots, enough so that I left my job. That the photography industry had changed so much so that there were few decent paying jobs left, and that I wouldn't be able to hack traveling alone as a woman, the latter, of course, being exactly what I love to do. But in any case, I listened to him. And I all but stopped shooting landscapes for profit in between 2007 and 2010. So for 3 years, I turned my work towards commercial outlets. So I photographed everything but weddings, funerals, and basically. So, I mean, I'd photograph like architecture, landscape architecture, jewelry, soccer. I don't know anything about soccer, senior portraits, food. Oh my God, food is exhausting. Every gig, though, food is exhausting, but every gig I would have this feeling in my gut and I'd be like, is this really why I left my job? Like to do this? And I think this was just another example of me listening to what they said without acknowledging my own voice and what I wanted and how that went awry. Although I am very grateful for those experiences. They have obviously made me a better photographer today, a better outdoor photographer. I have lots of learnings from those, but after about 3 years of doing that commercial work, when I started listening to my voice, it turns out that I'm just connected with nature, and I did kind of dumped all my commercial gigs, started focusing more on nature photography exclusively. My focus has changed. It has narrowed, since I left Intel, or since, 2010, it's changed. And, as I continue to make new connections and have new experiences in new places. So like, for example, my time in Acadia National Park, specifically my 3 artisan residencies there really connected me to water. That was the first time that I was like, oh, I really love this water stuff. And when I came home to Arizona, I started looking for water, which is not an abundant thing in the desert. And so when I fell in on the rapid in Moab, as part of my book, as part of the story that I tell in the book, I fell in love with the Colorado River. So it's just been like water, water in the desert, and then Colorado River. And so that's kind of what I'm focused on today. And so, connecting people with water, it's an ironic thing considering my fear about water, but I think it is authentic. And as you continue to evolve, as you learn new things, like you can change courses. Changing courses is part of the authenticity. And for me, I think it's important if you're considering selling your work, is again going back to, why are you a photographer? What do you do? Why do you do what you do? The answers are more intrinsically based. And so I think from a business perspective, once you sort out what it is, what brings you joy, that's the part about, selling your work without selling your soul. You've got to find your own soul. From a business perspective, it's really trying to find people who value that, those same things. And so from a business perspective, the question that I ask is so important to me in guiding my life and my business, that I put it on the front page of my website. And so it's like, well, what problem are you trying to solve with your products and your services? How can your work benefit others in their journey? And really what it comes down to is selling your work comes down to, it's really a game of matching, value levels between a giver and a receiver, such that nobody feels like they're being taken advantage of. And so for that to go well, you have to be authentic in your offering, your brand, your value, your quality, even your implementation, even your delivery. And so, I mean, nobody wants to feel duped, especially if they're handing you money, or something else of value to them. So, I mean, for me, it's, about presenting the most authentic experience that I possibly can. And, maybe it's weird, maybe it's funny, maybe it's wild, who knows, but just finding those people who, that's the game when it comes to selling your work. It's trying to find the other weirdos.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel really strongly in what you just said. I agree that if you're really true to what you're into, like say you're really into photographing trains or whatever, like I guarantee you that there's some people out there who love trains that are gonna love your photography, and it's just a matter of trying to get those people to see your stuff. So like
Absolutely.
leverage what you're into for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's going to be hard work. It's hard work no matter what kind of product or service you're selling. But it will be worth it, and you won't have to sell your soul to do it.
There you go. All right. So next to last question, or getting close anyway.
All right.
What advice or insight do you have, or perhaps does your book have, for listeners or viewers of this episode who are finding themselves stuck in their current situation? Perhaps they find themselves having reached the top of their game and they're feeling disappointed or unhappy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first and foremost is just acknowledging where you're at in your life. It's okay to be stuck. Like, it doesn't mean that you suck. It just means you're stuck. It's maybe you're out of ideas. Maybe it's time for a change. And so I think the important thing is that when you feel stuck, it's important to understand that time doesn't stop. Your life is still flowing. And how are you going to respond to this? Like, are you going to stay stuck? But you're paddling and maybe start moving again, even if maybe the destination or even the journey is unknown. Like, do you have the confidence to do that, to know that you will figure it out as you go? And so I do have, if it's okay, again, I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from the epilogue that kind of fit into this, if that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. You only get one run down this river of no return. You can't always go back upstream and rerun the rapids with faster, sleeker equipment on a better, cleaner line. You also can't always see what's around the next bend. You can, however, decide in the next second to choose your course, to pick the best line through the next rapids, to change directions. And you don't have to be perfect at it either. Be the best paddler you can be and tumble, rumble, and ramble as you face obstacles, rocks, eddies, boils, growing within your true self and embracing gratitude with this each turn. No doubt you can and will fail at many things over the course of a lifetime, especially if you're pushing your boundaries, challenging expectations, and leaning into uncertainty. But remember, the one thing you can never fail at, no matter how hard you try, is being yourself. Besides, would you rather try and fail or fail to try and live with regret? So that's from the book. But I also, I've also created a bookmark for the book, and it's about being your own river, to keep flowing no matter the obstacles. And every book that anybody who purchases a book will get a bookmark. But on the back, I kind of wanted to give a quick summary and a quick reminder to those who needed a pep talk. And it's like life lessons from the book, like be kind to yourself. Like when you get stuck, like it's pretty frustrating. It's the most important time to be kind to yourself. Follow curiosities. It's a great time to learn. Be grateful for what you have, not sad for what you lack. Sometimes things don't go, our way or go, however we planned. And so that's important.
Is one of them about eating pie?
That's the last one.
Oh, all right.
Live every day like it's your birthday. Eat your pie first. And I think that one is especially hard when you're going through adversity, right? Because you're like, oh God, it's like chaos, right? It's arguably the most important one. Self-care, I've learned, which I was not good at before this. Self-care is one of the most important things. And so it is important if you are stuck. Treat yourself. You've come this far. You've made it this far. It's just an opportunity to make a little bit of a turn and make a better life for yourself. The one thing that I will add is in the life lessons is believing the best, not the worst, is waiting for you. And so really, as a perfectionist, that was hard to understand. That I just thought like my whole life was over, I'd gotten stuck and that's the end, and oh my God. And actually it turns out that we can be pretty resourceful. We can hold on to gratitude, and pretty amazing things can transpire out of some pretty dark places. And so don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on yourself. Yeah.
Love it. All right. So how can listeners get a copy of your book, and is there a discount available to them?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can order now at www.sosaidtheriver.com. So it's the book title name. And yeah, as a thank you to you, Matt, and to your listeners, you'll get $4.95 off the list price of the autographed hard copy. If you would prefer the ebook, you can use the discount code E for FSTOP 2024. Clever, right? And you'll get $3 off the ebook's list price, and it's about a 15% discount on each one of them. And so, yeah, I look forward to sharing more of this story with everyone, and I hope that it's a meaningful journey for all the readers.
Yeah, and we'll put all that in the show notes as well for people who are like me who can't remember stuff like that. So
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, Colleen, last question. Who are some people that you would recommend that we learn more about, or perhaps have as guests here on the show?
Yeah, I mean, you have had just a remarkably phenomenal list of, of photographers and characters on this podcast, and there are many that I would definitely recommend. I'm going to go with three people that are intimately connected with the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon, Lake Powell, kind of that area. So the first person is Dave Showalter. He is the author and photographer of the award-winning book Living River: The Promise of the Mighty Colorado River. He's a senior fellow with the ILCP, and he's just a remarkable human. I had the chance to meet him at a NAMPA conference, and him putting up a Mary Oliver quote is actually where the book title, So Said the River, came from. So Dave is just an awesome person, and a remarkable writer and remarkable photographer. So the second person is Dawn Kish, who I actually don't know personally, but she is prolifically published, and she's an adventurous photographer who I would personally love to know more about. Her most recent project was a documentary about a gentleman named Tad Nichols. He traveled with characters like Katie Lee, and he photographed before Lake Powell. Like, he photographed, pre Glen Canyon Dam, and her project was a documentary film called Tad's Emerging World, Glen Canyon Exposed. It's a really fascinating film. So, and then the third person that I would recommend is Amy Martin. And again, I don't know her personally, but I absolutely love her work. She's a photographer who happened to be a backcountry ranger at Grand Canyon National Park. Her amazing photography most recently helped to establish, I hope I'm gonna try and pronounce this. I even wrote the pronunciation down. She helped to establish the Baj Nawabjo Ita Kukavini ancestral footprints of the Grand Canyon National Monument. I hope I got that right. Cool. Part of it, but she was instrumental in kind of helping with that, and so she's definitely got a environmental slant and really trying to protect our public land. So I really appreciate all three of their contributions to the landscape in general, but obviously the Colorado River watershed.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Colleen, this has been so much fun, and congratulations on this monumental accomplishment, even though we're not focused on accomplishments, right?
Right.
But we should celebrate them when we are able to. So congratulations.
Absolutely. Yes, we will definitely celebrate. It's definitely, we do need to take those moments where we're proud of ourselves and we're proud of the work that we have done. And so the celebration is absolutely in order, and yeah, we just keep flowing, right?
So said the river.
So said the river. So say I. So said the river. Clever.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you to Colleen for the wonderful conversation on the podcast. Unfortunately, my program edited out her discount code for the book, which is 4FSTOP 2024. head to sosaystheriver.com to get your own copy of the book today. You won't regret it, I promise. I was surprised recently to learn that a listener from YouTube was unaware that we have a backlog of over 350 episodes dating back to 2017. And likewise, I've heard people tell me that they didn't know that the show is available on YouTube. No matter how you prefer to get your photography inspiration, I've got you covered. So cheers. Lastly, I know that listeners are probably tired of me asking for help, but if you can't support the show financially on Patreon, I'd greatly appreciate your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Just take a moment and leave your review. It really does help other listeners discover the show. Thank you in advance. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.